The living room exploded with rage as Emma shouted, "You lied to me." Her voice shook, the papers in her hands trembling like her spirit. James stood frozen, his mask of charm slipping, his silence louder than thunder. Emma's breath was sharp, each inhale a battle against betrayal. The world she thought she knew shattered, and the perfect man she trusted was dissolving before her eyes. Friends stared, whispers filling the room, disbelief echoing. Was any of it real? Emma said, her tone breaking. James looked at her, eyes cold, yet a flicker of fear betrayed him. The golden life they built together now burned under the cruel light of truth. The betrayal was naked, undeniable, and Emma felt her soul collapse into dust. The silence after Emma's scream was suffocating, each second dripping with disbelief. She whispered, "Tell me it isn't true." James finally spoke, his voice low, "You wouldn't understand." Her chest tightened, the words slicing her deeper than the lies themselves. Friends exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared speak. Emma clutched her stomach, as if steadying herself against an invisible knife. Her world felt stolen, her love ripped apart by secrets she could no longer deny. Emma staggered back, her body heavy as if the truth weighed more than her bones. "You never loved me," she whispered. James smirked faintly, a cruel spark in his eyes. "Love," he said, "it was always about control." Her knees weakened, the room tilting, her friends reaching out but too stunned to move. The perfect life she once cherished crumbled into ash with every word he spoke. The betrayal dug deeper as Emma recalled the promises, the vows, the nights she thought safe. Her hand pressed against the wall, fingers trembling. "All those trips, the photos, were they lies too?" she cried. James adjusted his collar, his silence confirming the worst. Her friends gasped, covering their mouths, realization settling like poison. Emma's voice cracked, each word drenched in despair, her heart collapsing under the weight of deceit. Emma sank to the floor, her legs giving way, sobs breaking free. James towered above her, his expression unreadable, his presence chilling. One friend finally stepped forward, whispering, "Emma, you need to leave." She shook her head, unable to move, still chained to the hope that some part of him was real. But deep inside she knew the man she loved never existed. Only a mask remained, and the truth was more terrifying than the lie. Emma sat alone in her bedroom, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the only sound in the silence. She clutched her knees to her chest, rocking slightly, her tears staining the blanket. Her mind replayed the moment James' smirk cut through her trust. She whispered to herself, "How could I not see?" Every memory felt poisoned now, every kiss transformed into a trick. Her phone lit up on the nightstand, a message from Sarah blinking. Sarah had always warned her, but Emma chose to believe the dream instead of the truth. She stared at the message, unable to open it. Shame pressed on her chest, heavier than grief. Thought of facing the world terrified her. She wanted to scream, but her body felt like stone. She lay back against the headboard, staring at the cracks on the ceiling, asking herself how she could rebuild when her foundation was never real. Morning light crept through blinds, harsh and unkind. Emma sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring into the steam. Sarah walked in, her face tense. "You should have listened," she said softly, but her tone carried both anger and love. Emma nodded, her throat tight, unable to answer. She wanted comfort, but also punishment. The trust she gave James now felt like a scar burned into her chest. Sarah leaned forward, resting her hand on Emma's, her eyes filled with both sorrow and frustration. "He was too perfect," she whispered. That was the warning. Emma's hands shook around the coffee mug, her shame reflecting in the dark liquid. She whispered back, "I just wanted someone to love me." The room felt smaller with every truth spoken aloud, as if the walls themselves were disappointed. Emma opened her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, fear crawling through her veins. She searched for James' name, her heart pounding as articles, records, and old photos filled the screen. Each click unraveled another lie. He was tied to another city, another woman, another life. Her chest caved in, as her world twisted further. She whispered, "How many lives did you live?" Her reflection in the screen stared back, hollow and broken. Sarah stood behind her, arms crossed, watching as Emma's illusion shattered piece by piece. "You deserve the truth, even if it hurts," Sarah said firmly. Emma's tears blurred the words on the screen, her body trembling as if even reading the truth was dangerous. Every keystroke felt like peeling away layers of her own skin. The evening brought no peace. Emma sat with Sarah on the porch, twilight painting the sky in bruised colors. "I feel like I'm disappearing," Emma whispered, her voice cracking. Sarah shook her head, gripping her friend's hand. "You're still here. He can't erase you." Emma closed her eyes, inhaling the cool air, yet even the breeze felt heavy. She could still smell James' cologne in her mind, like a ghost haunting her. "I believed every word," she said, her voice laced with self-loathing. Sarah pulled her closer, resting her head against her shoulder. The silence between them was loud, filled with all the warnings ignored and all the pain left behind. Emma let herself lean into Sarah's strength, even as shame gnawed at her heart. Night wrapped around Emma's home like a prison. She walked into the bathroom, flicking on the cold fluorescent light. Her reflection stared back, unrecognizable. She touched her face, whispering, "Who am I without him?" Her skin looked pale, her eyes swollen from tears. Every promise James made echoed like cruel laughter in her head. She clenched the sink, her knuckles white as the mirror fogged with her shaky breath. Sarah's voice echoed from the hall, "You'll survive this." Emma closed her eyes, imagining smashing the glass just to break free from the image of the woman James destroyed. She steadied herself, fighting the urge. "I have to find myself again," she whispered. The words barely reached her own ears, yet they planted a fragile seed of strength. Emma forced herself into James' study, the air thick with stale cologne and old whiskey. Her fingers traced the shelves lined with books he never read. The desk was neat, too neat, almost staged. She opened a drawer and froze. Fake passports, different names, scattered credit cards stared back at her. Her heart thundered, her throat closing. "How many lives did you live?" she whispered to the empty room. Each photo, each ID carried a new mask, a different man. She could hear Sarah's voice in her head, warning her of the charm too smooth to be true. Rage mixed with grief until she could barely breathe. She slammed the drawer shut, the sound shattering the silence. For the first time she felt not just betrayed but hunted, as if James had been playing a game she never had a chance to win. Later that evening, Emma sat with Sarah at the kitchen table, the evidence spread before them. Sarah's face hardened as she scanned the documents. "He's not just a liar," she said, "he's a predator." Emma nodded slowly, her body shaking with anger. She whispered, "I thought I mattered to him." Sarah reached across the table, gripping her friend's trembling hands. "You mattered, just not to him. He only matters to himself." Emma's tears burned, yet her jaw tightened. Her grief was transforming into fury. She could no longer deny that James had built their life on lies, designed to control her. She felt a surge of strength she hadn't known she still had. The victim inside her was cracking, giving way to something harder, sharper, and ready to fight back. The next day, Emma walked into the bank, her legs trembling, but her face steady. The marble floor echoed under her shoes as she approached the counter. "I need to know everything about these accounts," she said firmly, placing papers down. The clerk hesitated, glancing nervously before excusing himself. Minutes stretched like hours until a man in a suit approached. His eyes flickered with unease. "I'm afraid I can't disclose much," he said, voice low. Emma leaned forward, her tone sharp. "You knew," she whispered, her words piercing. His silence answered for him. Rage flared in her chest. She realized James had enablers everywhere, people who chose to look away. Her fists clenched. "You all let him destroy me," she said, her voice breaking as shame filled the clerk's eyes. Emma sat in the park afterward, clutching her purse, staring at families walking past. The world felt cruelly normal, as if her life hadn't imploded. Sarah joined her, carrying 2 coffees. He built walls of lies, Sarah said gently, but even walls collapse. Emma sighed, exhaustion heavy in her bones. I don't know who I am anymore, she admitted, her voice quiet. Sarah put the coffee in her hands, grounding her. You're still you, Sarah said. Emma let the warmth soak into her fingers, her eyes scanning strangers' faces, wondering how many of them hid secrets like James. The sun dipped lower, painting the park in shades of gold, but Emma felt only a cold resolve building inside. She would not let him vanish into another life unscathed. That night, Emma opened the closet where James kept his suits, the scent of him still clinging to the fabric. She ran her fingers across the jackets, every touch igniting fury. Oh, costumes, she whispered. Behind a hidden flap, she found more papers, fake leases, secret bank slips. Her breath caught. The scale of the deception crushed her chest. He planned everything, she muttered, tears spilling again. She fell to her knees, clutching the evidence, her sobs echoing against the walls. Yet beneath the grief, a spark of defiance glimmered. If James thought she would remain broken, he underestimated her. She stood slowly, wiping her tears with shaking hands, and whispered, I will expose you. The words felt heavier than steel, but steadier than hope. Emma paced the living room, clutching the papers she had uncovered, her body shaking with fury. Sarah sat stiff on the couch, her face pale, eyes avoiding Emma's. You knew, Emma said, her voice trembling yet sharp. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line, silence louder than denial. You defended him, Emma cried, rage and betrayal surging. Sarah finally whispered, I thought it was harmless. At first. Emma froze, her chest collapsing. The realization cut deeper than James' lies. Her closest friend had played a role in the deception. Sarah avoided her gaze, tears forming. He promised me things too, she admitted. Emma's hands dropped, the papers scattering to the floor. The walls closed in, trust crumbling on every side. Her heart screamed that no one was safe. Emma's voice cracked. You were my anchor, Sarah. You told me he was dangerous, yet you helped him. Sarah leaned forward, desperation in her tone. I never wanted it to go this far, she said. Emma staggered back, her knees trembling. You chose him over me, she whispered, her voice breaking into shards. Sarah's hands reached out but fell short, the guilt on her face unmistakable. Emma shook her head, her vision blurred by tears. You betrayed me as much as he did, she said, her words cutting like a blade. The silence afterward was unbearable, filled with broken trust and irreversible cracks. Sarah bowed her head, her sobs muffled in her palms. Emma realized she was standing on a battlefield, but this wound cut from within her own circle. Emma stormed out into the night, the air cold against her flushed skin. Her feet carried her to James' office downtown, its windows glowing faintly. She pressed her face to the glass, peering inside. On his desk lay more files, photographs and contracts linking Sarah to James' schemes. Her breath caught, fury rising with each second. They worked together, she whispered in disbelief. The truth spread like poison through her veins. She backed away from the glass, her hands trembling. The city lights blurred with her tears, but her mind was sharper than ever. James wasn't just a liar. He was a puppeteer, and Sarah had been one of his strings. The betrayal now burned into her bones, leaving her body heavy with grief and rage. The next morning, Emma confronted Sarah once more, her voice sharp. I saw the files. You weren't just silent, you were involved. Sarah's face drained of color, her denial faltering. He promised me escape, she whispered, a new life, away from everything. Emma's fury ignited into a cold fire. You destroyed mine for your dream, she said. Sarah's tears fell, her shoulders crumbling. Emma turned away, unable to look at her. The weight of betrayal was suffocating, the wound deeper because it came from a friend. The room fell still, the final strings of their friendship snapping. For Emma, there was no return, no forgiveness. Only a hunger for the truth and a vow to uncover every layer of deception that James built with his allies. That night, Emma sat alone on her porch, her body wrapped in a blanket, the cool air pressing against her skin. She stared into the darkness, memories of James and Sarah colliding in her mind like shards of glass. They were both lies, she whispered. The truth was clear now. James had orchestrated everything, and Sarah had helped keep the illusion alive. Yet, as broken as she felt, a flame of resolve flickered inside her chest. She would not crumble. She would not stay silent. She whispered into the night, "I will end this." The stars above looked distant, cold, yet they mirrored the steel now forming in her spirit. Her pain was not just grief anymore. It was fuel. She would turn betrayal into fire. Emma stormed into James' downtown apartment, her fists pounding the door until it swung open. He stood inside, calm, a drink in his hand, the smirk she once adored now venom. "You finally found me," he said smoothly, as if he had been waiting. Emma's chest heaved, fury rising with each breath. "You ruined my life," she shouted, her voice echoing against the walls. James sipped his glass unbothered. "I gave you a life better than you deserved," he replied coldly. Emma stepped closer, her body trembling, but her voice sharpened into steel. "You gave me a nightmare." The tension cracked the air, thick and suffocating. The perfect mask he wore for years was gone, and in its place stood the predator she could finally see clearly. James circled Emma like a hunter, his eyes glinting with cruelty. "You were easy," he said, his words slicing deeper than any knife. Emma's hands shook, but she didn't move back. "I believed in you," she said, her voice trembling yet fierce. He laughed, the sound hollow, echoing across the room. "Belief is the simplest con." Emma's fury erupted. "You're nothing without the lies." For a moment, James' smirk faltered, a crack in his armor. Emma caught it, and strength flared inside her chest. She had spent months drowning in his deception, but tonight she was rising above it. She met his gaze, her jaw set, her body rigid with defiance. The silence that followed burned hotter than fire, the storm of their collision just beginning to explode. Emma grabbed the folder from the coffee table, scattering documents across the floor. Bank slips, forged contracts, names of other women spilled like confessions. James lunged forward, but Emma stood firm, blocking him. "You built empires on lies," she said, her voice trembling with rage. His face darkened, the charm gone, replaced by pure menace. "Put it down," he ordered, his tone sharp as steel. Emma shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "You can't bury the truth anymore." James clenched his fists, his mask fully shattered. The man before her wasn't a lover, or even a husband. He was a predator caught in the light of exposure, and Emma realized she was no longer afraid. The confrontation escalated, their voices clashing like thunder. Emma shouted, "You fooled everyone, but you won't silence me." James stepped closer, his hand gripping her arm with sudden force. Pain shot through her, but she didn't pull away. "You're mine," he hissed, his face inches from hers. Emma met his stare, her eyes blazing through tears. "Not anymore," she whispered. With sudden strength, she tore her arm free, shoving him back. He stumbled against the table, the glass shattering as whiskey spilled across the floor. The sound cracked the tension wide open, leaving only raw fury between them. Emma's chest rose and fell rapidly, her resolve finally solidifying. She wasn't just fighting James anymore. She was reclaiming herself. James steadied himself, his chest heaving with rage, shards of glass crunching under his shoes. "You think you can win," he sneered. Emma stepped forward, her voice trembling but unbroken. "I already have. You don't own me anymore." The air between them felt electric, filled with years of lies unraveling in a single breath. James' fists tightened, but Emma didn't flinch. For the first time, she looked at him and saw nothing of the man she thought she loved. Only a predator cornered by truth. Her tears dried on her cheeks, replaced by steel. "This ends tonight," she whispered. And in that moment, Even James knew the battle was shifting. She wasn't the broken woman he had left behind. She was rising. The night after their confrontation, Emma sat across from Detective Harris at the precinct, her body rigid as she laid the documents on his desk. His eyes scanned the evidence with growing intensity. "This is bigger than one scam," he said firmly. Emma's voice trembled. "He's ruined lives. Mine was only one of them." Harris leaned forward, his tone sharp. "We've been tracking him for years. You may have given us what we need." For the first time, Emma felt the weight shift. It wasn't just her pain anymore. It was a chance at justice. Her hands shook, but a flicker of strength sparked behind her eyes. She whispered, "Then let's finish this." The words felt final, like the beginning of her redemption. Emma walked out of the station, into the night air, Sarah waiting by the curb. Their eyes met, heavy with betrayal and grief. Sarah stepped forward, voice breaking. "I never wanted it to end like this." Emma's jaw tightened, her arms crossing. "But you chose him," she said coldly. Sarah nodded, tears streaking her face. "I was weak. I thought he'd save me." Emma shook her head slowly. "He destroyed us both." The silence between them was sharp, filled with words they could never take back. Sarah reached out, but Emma stepped back, her decision clear. Their friendship was shattered beyond repair. For Emma, the truth was brutal but necessary. Not everyone could be saved, and Sarah had made her choice long before this night. Days later, Emma sat alone at her kitchen table, stacks of papers and photographs scattered around her. Her eyes traced every lie, every name tied to James' schemes. She realized how vast the damage was, stretching far beyond her home. Her voice cracked as she whispered to herself, "How many lives did you ruin?" She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. For so long she had been trapped in grief, but now grief had transformed into resolve. She gathered the documents into neat piles, preparing to deliver them. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, stronger, colder, unrecognizable. She was no longer the woman who craved his love. She was the one who would end his reign of lies. Emma stood outside the courthouse, her heart pounding as reporters gathered around. Flashes lit the air, voices shouting questions she couldn't hear. Her grip on the evidence folder tightened. James was inside, facing charges, but the scars he left would remain. A reporter shouted, "Do you feel justice is coming?" Emma's lips trembled, but she answered firmly, "Truth always wins, even if late." The words carried into the chaos, grounding her. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor. For the first time she felt taller, stronger, her pain now a weapon sharpened by betrayal. As she climbed the courthouse steps, her chest swelled with both dread and pride. This wasn't closure, but it was a step toward reclaiming herself. That evening, Emma returned home, the silence heavy but no longer suffocating. She set the folder down and collapsed into her chair. The house still carried echoes of James' lies, but now it also carried her defiance. She whispered to herself, "You don't live here anymore." Her chest eased as if releasing a weight that had bound her for years. She looked around at the walls, the photos, the furniture, all tainted by his presence, but her voice steadied. "This is mine again." She closed her eyes, tears slipping silently, not of grief but of release. The war wasn't over, but she had survived the battlefield. The scars would remain, but they were now proof of her strength, not his power. Emma stood outside the courthouse after the hearing, the crowd dispersing, the air heavy with whispers of James' crimes. She watched him led away in handcuffs, his smirk gone, his eyes cold and hollow. The man she once trusted was now only a shadow. She exhaled, her chest trembling with relief and sorrow. The victory felt bitter, but it was hers. The storm was not fully over, but the chains he bound her with had shattered. She whispered under her breath, "You don't own me anymore." The words tasted like freedom, sharp and final. For the first time in years, she felt her voice was her own. That evening, Emma walked through her house in silence, the same walls that once carried his lies, now echoing only her steps. She paused at their old wedding photo, the smiles now grotesque reminders. With steady hands, she lifted it off the wall. Her reflection in the glass stared back, but it wasn't the broken woman who once wept for him. It was someone harder, steadier, scarred but stronger. She dropped the frame into the trash, the glass cracking loudly. The sound echoed like closure, sharp and merciless. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. The next day, Emma met Detective Harris at a cafe, the sun spilling through large windows. He slid a folder across the table. "You helped us close a door on him," he said. Emma traced the folder with her fingertips, her throat tight. "Then, it was worth the pain," she replied softly. Harris nodded, his eyes steady, but his voice heavy. "Scars never vanish, but they remind us we survived." Emma smiled faintly, her heart carrying both ache and gratitude. She realized survival was not weakness. It was proof she had outlasted the storm. At sunset, Emma returned to the park where she once sat shattered. This time the sky burned orange and pink, and she felt the weight of the air differently. Families laughed around her, their joy no longer a cruel contrast, but a reminder of hope. She whispered, "I will live again." Her chest swelled with fragile courage. She closed her eyes and let the breeze wash over her, not as a reminder of what she lost, but of what she still had. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had changed shape, no longer consuming her. That night, Emma stood before her mirror, the same one that once reflected her tears. Her face looked older, not from years, but from battles. She leaned closer, whispering, "I survived you." The silence swallowed her words, but the truth was undeniable. James no longer existed in her world. He had been erased, not by time but by her strength. She touched the mirror gently, as if sealing the vow. Then she turned away, stepping into the quiet night, her future unwritten but finally her own. The last chains had broken, leaving her free.